Oh, we are live.
Yay! I can't tell.
I can tell.
You're not live on my end, which is so bizarre. So, Anne, how are you? There we go. Oh, good. Ta-da.
We're rolling.
Yay. So, Anne, thank you so much for joining us. We're a little early.
Okay.
So we'll give folks like a couple minutes.
5 minutes early is late.
I know. And I'm always late. Oh, but this is good. Okay. So let me open this up. So the way that we'll do it, and if anybody has popped in already, yay, welcome. What we will do is to have an opportunity for questions. The way that we'll do that is to have people type in the comments so that we can see them, and I'll read them to you so you don't have to worry about that.
Well, good, because my multitasking skills are not as good as my clinical skills.
So it's a minute before 3.
Okay.
Okay, and I have to turn it down so that I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, can you? I did this last time. Okay. You went away.
I'm here.
Okay, there you go. So, Anne, thank you for joining us. Just to give everybody the same kind of level field, we are the League of Creative Interventionists, an organization that really believes that creativity can be the root for community and city change and transformation. We do a lot of our work by working with creatives who work with their neighbors and community. And one of the things that we are seeing, and part of the reason why we're having this conversation, is that people who are invested in doing this work are really having a hard time along with their neighbors, because this is a totally kind of unique moment for all of us. And so, really kind of thinking about how we kind of serve community. How do we serve ourselves? How do we manage in this moment of, tension and trauma and being unsure is something that's really important. And when I look back at some of the projects that the League has done, there's this really interesting connection. We've had this kind of pop up opportunity to talk to people about your fears. And so it's this wonderful way of kind of connecting back to the history of what we've done, but then also looking forward and dealing with real issues right now.
Love it.
So, that's a lot. But Anne, I'm so glad that you were able to join us. Can you introduce
my pleasure.
yourself to the collective?
Sure. Hey, everyone. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I've been practicing in North Carolina for about 20 years. Much of my work was in private practice. And then a couple of years ago, I left my private practice to pursue a job as a wellness director and counselor at a nonprofit that is a transitional housing shelter for women and children, and that is in the greater Charlotte community. And I absolutely love working in this type of a community. It's just a whole different opportunity to serve in a capacity where I can not only be contributing to my community, but be doing the job that I love, and have an opportunity to get paid to do something I love. And so, that's really what it's all about, isn't it?
It is. So there's so much I think we can talk about.
Yes.
One of the things, and actually we talked about it kind of offline, maybe.
Yes.
The whole idea of how people are feeling, and this moment as we're in kind of a pandemic, like what are the things that are kind of coming up for a lot of people? And then ultimately thinking about how we can address some of those things. And so for me, I tend to try to be someone who does not sweat the small stuff, right? And really kind of allow for process to happen. And I found that I am having a hard time with that in the moment. And you actually said there was a name for that.
It's called pandemic stress. Yes. And or COVID stress, however you want to label it. But I think what we're finding in the mental health community is that emotional distress, mental health issues, substance abuse concerns, domestic violence, all these things are exacerbated at a much faster level during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Things that like you are self-proclaimed person who doesn't sweat the small stuff, and now people like yourself are all sweating the small stuff because everything is just accelerated at such a quicker rate. Our ability to cope has been thwarted as well, because a lot of the things that we do, a lot of things we used to take for granted, we're not able to do right now. Mm-hmm. And that is very disconcerting for a lot of people. And so you take a stressful event or a stressful feeling, and you're having difficulty dealing with that. And then you have the reality then that you have to grieve that you no longer have the coping mechanism that you used to have. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, it's paralyzing, and they really get stuck. I know for me, I'd mentioned this to you earlier, for a lot of people, doing things and engaging their physical bodies by doing certain things, it decreases stress. Okay, well now mm-hmm. we're all stuck in sort of this bubble where we're doing things electronically, and we're missing that connection or that presence of being able to use our physical body to work our stress out. Or for me, in the homeless shelter, we have this slogan that home is where the hugs are. Well, right now we can't hug people, and mm-hmm. it's stressing our residents out because we can't hug them, and it's stressing the staff because we're not able to us a hug is a form of treatment.
Right.
So yeah, so people are feeling just huge amounts of stress. And for some people that have always sort of rolled with the punches and sort of never really manifested a lot of stress, are finding that that's no longer the case.
Mm-hmm. So what can we do? A lot of, and we talked about this, a lot of people that we work with are creatives. A lot of folks are like really personally invested in community and like transformation and service. And so, this moment has really changed the way that people are able to engage. What are some things that we can do to deal with pandemic stress?
Well, one thing that I can't help but mention is the reality that stress can kill creativity. So, so that's a problem in itself, mm-hmm. so I think you can ask people to do creative things. And I definitely want us to talk about that, but I don't think we can talk about that without mentioning the reality that stress actually can kill creativity. Mm-hmm. So like, I think right now, in my professional life and in my personal life, where people are feeling like they can't do the things they always did, because if they go out in public, they're going to get shamed for going out in public, or they're going to get sick if they go out in public, or so they're feeling like the only thing they can do is watch Netflix. And the reality is there are a lot of things that you can do other than Netflix.
I watch a lot of Netflix.
Yes. But there's two places that have been extremely busy right now in the retail space, and that's Home Depot and Lowe's. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily because they don't care about what other people, it's they're looking to work in their yards, or they're looking to plant vegetables, or they're looking to plant flowers. Okay. The act of digging in the soil keeps people connected. Okay. We have a need to connect with other people physically.
Right.
And in the absence of that, okay, we have found, and the research shows that gardening, there's actually been a gardening boom. They say similar to something that occurred during World War II. There's a wonderful article on, I want to make sure I give them credit. It's on conversation.com, and it talks all about the impulse to garden.
Okay.
It talks about how it fulfills a desire for belonging and connection. And it's so true. So that's why people are doing that, because it is releasing endorphins. It is making them feel connected. So, but you don't have to be a master gardener.
Right.
You know, most plants have that little tag, and it'll tell you, you know, needs sun, needs shade. You know, the tag means it. So don't plant certain things where it says that they need full sun and plant them in the shade, you know.
Right.
Just like extroverts need to be watered with, you know, lots of communication, and, you know, so plants that need lots of sun actually need lots of sun. So, but there's, you know, there's research though that shows that being able to start a project, getting your hands dirty, and being able to be able to go back each day and kind of see, you know, oh, you know, am I making any progress? You know, just like human beings, you know, plants grow when they're watered. You know, but it's definitely one of those things that, you know, the research is showing that it is not in place of human contact, but it can mimic some of the same emotional attachments.
Okay, so, and what's awesome is that one of our fellows is a gardener and an herbalist. And so he has been talking, what his project with us is around kind of community gardening, which of course in the moment is a challenge. But we've been able to develop these kits that help people think about starting their own home garden. And it is interesting, like it doesn't have to be, like you said, this massive thing. But that like little small connection to growing something is kind of fantastic.
Well, yeah, and then you have the delight of engaging with something that's real.
Right. I know. That is like so important.
It's hugely important. Absolutely.
And can you talk a little bit more about the idea of how creativity is affected by this? And if you have kind of like ideas or recommendations for people who are struggling with that, because I know a number of artists who have kind of stepped away from their practice because they just can't really, they can't feel it right now.
Well, I think that, you know, there's this, you know, as we talk about this COVID stress, there's also a COVID depression, and it doesn't look necessarily like a situational or a clinical depression, but it can manifest itself in ways where our motivations for doing things that we've done in the past that gave us joy, we sort of stop buying into the fact that they're going to work. And so then you develop that sort of stinking thinking, or that idea that, you know, like, I don't really want to do that, or I'm not motivated to do that. Or, you know, maybe you were motivated, you know, after week 2, but since there was 897 days in April this year.
So true. Okay, you felt that way too.
Oh my gosh, yes, everybody's feeling that way. So it's like, you know, like even our dog is like, we're not going on another walk. Please
Right.
don't
Just stay home.
Right. So part of that COVID depression is just like, you know, is that really going to make me feel better? You know, and I get that because I've had those moments too, but I think it's the longer you avoid it, the longer you sort of hide under the covers, the more those thoughts sort of grow. And you do have to tap into sort of your inner resources of resiliency. If you have somebody in your house that you know maybe is a better motivator than you are, because you know, I find like my husband and I are not at the same dark place at the same time, you know. So some, you find that accountability partner, or you know, a lot of people are doing, you know, Zoom counseling or different types of online counseling because they're needing to be reminded that that they have coping skills. But sometimes we also need to recognize in ourselves that, you know, we're not above depression or we're not above anxiety. And sometimes you are not going to tap into some of those creative things that you used to do until you acknowledge the grief that you're feeling right now, because there is a major grief process that's going on. Like, we'll set like an idea for myself. We're like, oh, okay, well, you know, maybe if I can still get to this event that's 2 weeks from now, then everything's going to be fine. And then you get to that 2-week event, it's canceled, and the grieving process starts all over again. And what do we do to combat grief? Well, we need to have things to look forward to. That's a healthy coping skill. So then we look forward to that, we get to it, and it's canceled. So, you know, I think that's the key, is acknowledging that, you know what, I'm in pain and this is really hard, and you need to grieve some of that. And if you empty a little space to grieve some of that, then you may want to go back into your garage and you may want to build something. I read an article recently that talked about some other creative things that people are doing. If it's not gardening, I had talked to somebody who their grandfather or great grandfather, whoever, had collected like a bunch of war memorabilia. So they decided they were going to start doing reenactments in their basement. Really? You know, I mean, people are trying to, and they're recognizing that this is a difficult time and we have to do things to lift ourselves up. I'd mentioned to you too, like my sister is doing cooking videos, and she introduces a different nonprofit and sort of highlights and showcases them as she's cooking different things. So the long and short of your question though is
yeah, I love it,
is, you know, you have to acknowledge that there's some pain there. And when you acknowledge that pain, you make room for desire.
Ooh, I like that. When you acknowledge that pain, you make room for desire. I need to I need a shirt that says that, or like to write it on my wall.
Okay, let's do it.
I know, right? Sure. Like that. That'll be
our creative part.
Yes, we'll make sure it's like already, and then I'll do like a drive-by and see your shirt.
Yeah,
I like that idea that you mentioned. There's two things that you mentioned: this idea of pouring out a little space that will allow you to do something else and to be creative. But then also you mentioned, and I don't want this to float by, this idea of alternative resources or ways that people are finding help and people to speak to. Do you, and not to put you on the spot, and if not, we can definitely like look some of them up, but do you have places that you can recommend or encourage people to look for, like online services, or like, are there groups that are doing this kind of work that you can just share?
Absolutely. And I get geeked up about this stuff. So if I start talking too much, you just have to say, you know, but there's a couple of great online resources. One is betterhelp.com. They are a subscription service. They do not take insurance, but they charge, you know, and these are estimates, but they charge monthly fees, and their fees are usually like around $200 for the whole month. And you get face-to-face counseling, telephonic support, chat, email, all that kind of stuff. And then they have their own referral agency, and they refer to what's called team counseling. and for teens, and teens love it too, because they can get on and do the, they're better at this technology than we are anyway. But
Yeah.
so those are both, outstanding resources. But most private therapists that take insurance and are all doing telehealth now, and it's and it's great because you can do it at your convenience. You can, if you struggle with privacy and there's people at home, you can sit in your bathtub, not naked, but you can hide in your bathtub, on the phone. You can do it. You can hide in your closet or under your bed, or wait till everybody goes to sleep. These therapists are amazing. They're super flexible, and a lot of them do bill insurance. What's really disconcerting right now is a lot of the community providers are closed. So the underserved communities, or communities who don't have access to insurance, are not getting a lot of their needs met right now. And there's really not a solution out there for that right now. It's very, very upsetting.
And hopefully, that will turn around with things that are kind of reopening.
Yes.
And I know that you work with a community that really has those concerns.
Yes.
And a lot of the people that our fellows kind of encounter in different spaces also, and even our fellows, right, as creatives, have limited resources, and often find themselves having to make a choice, especially around insurance. I'm wondering if you could, kind of getting back to this idea of pouring a little space out and finding ways to be creative, but then also just like thinking about people who might not have access, like how can we all kind of encourage mental health in this moment?
Well, I think, doing things like we're doing today, I think, are extremely helpful, because, so many people have Facebook and different types of social media outlets. I follow probably a couple hundred different social media outlets that do offer online, videos and free resources. There are some amazing TED Talks. I talk about Brene Brown a lot. A lot of people are not familiar with Brene, but
why don't you go ahead and talk about her a little bit?
Yeah. So Brene, it's spelled B-R-E-N-E, Brown, like the color. She is a shame and vulnerability researcher. And I know a lot of people hear that and they're like, what? I don't want to deal with any of that. But she is so down to earth and so cool. And she has a ton of education and a ton of experience, but she is just like you or I, she's just a regular Texan girl. And she, she's not afraid to have difficult conversations, and she's not afraid to talk about things that are hard. You talk about shame, like is one of those things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Well, there are so many people out of work right now, and so many people that are out of work who provide for their families, or their identity is wrapped up in who they are. And right now, or even, creative types, are not able to produce in the way that they want to produce, or get the feedback from people that they need in order to keep doing their work. It's igniting all kinds of shame and trauma and fear. And she talks about how the antidote to that, is empathy and courage. And when we're asked to, as if we're okay, even when we're not, to tap into those, those ideas of resiliency and, being brave, even in the face of uncertainty. I mean, what's more uncertain than a pandemic right now? Right. But she's got some wonderful TED Talks and wonderful resources for folks. If I wanted folks that did not have a lot of access to care, to hear somebody professional that would make them feel like she was a lot like them and she was relatable, I would say, read some of her books or look at some of her TED Talks. I mean, she's incredible. And there are so many providers out there that are giving their intellectual capital, they're giving it for free. It's available online, take advantage of it. For some people, engaging that self-help space works. Therapy isn't for everybody. Some people don't want to go sit down on a couch and unpack all that.
Right.
But they do want to hear something that that they can hold on to. They want to hear an idea. They want to hear that, oh, maybe if I, oh yeah, I could see myself doing that. That might be something I could try. People are looking for something attainable that they can do, something that that's tactical, that a procedure.
Did I disappear?
I still see you.
Flip between like Facebook and here just to make sure that I see any questions or comments. So that was like one of my little slow moments.
That's okay. You're fine.
So if you could talk a little bit, I think, about this idea of fear. And then if you could also, I think it would be great as we are kind of, I guess, going towards opening, which might generate some other feelings, how we might kind of think about those moments or kind of transition into really what is like this new space that kind of feels still a little bit uncomfortable, at least from my perspective, or a little unsure.
Okay. So, well, fear, whether it's, about a pandemic or about going to work or staying safe, or, fear about taking an exam, whatever type of fear there is out there, I think it's a very, very natural emotion. It sort of is our alarm system. Okay. And so the goal is not to not be afraid. Okay. We need that fear. It's sort of like when a car pulls out in front of you and all of a sudden you feel tingling everywhere, your heart rate accelerates. Well, we need that for our survival. But the problem is if that fear sort of unpacks itself, then it stops us from doing things that we need to for our survival. I think a lot of people that have been through traumatic things in their history, everything that's happening in life right now is sort of traumatic. And we're and now as things start to open up, everybody's saying, all right, well now you're gonna have to think about going back to work, and how do you go back to work, or how do you go back visiting some of these places when the risk is still out there? Okay. And I wish I had an answer for how you do that. Okay. But I think what I would tell anyone who is struggling with fear is you have to first, you have to realize, is this fear meant to protect me? Because if it's meant to protect you, then you may want to listen to it. That fear that tells you when your volatile ex comes to your house and you're deciding whether or not to open the door, you need to listen to that fear and not open the door. Okay. But if you have the type of fear that's telling you or giving you so much anxiety that you can't function, and it's in regards to doing something like going back to work, then you're gonna treat that and look at that type of fear a little bit differently. So I think it's one of those things where the opposite of fear is courage. So how do we muster the courage to do the things that we're afraid of? How do we do that? Some of us are born that way. I was raised by a football coach, so it was just like, well, you do it, do it anyway. Right. Right. Like, okay, but not everybody is, so some of it's how you were raised, the experiences you've had, how much trauma you've had in your life. All these things have to do with how we face fear. But in modern times, now we're trying to figure out, can I have the courage to put myself back out into an uncertain world? And I think the answer is going to be individual for everybody. I think there's so many factors. Who you are pre-COVID-19 has a lot to do with how you're going to cope. So if pre-COVID-19 you were already struggling with some things, you were struggling with a lot of fear and uncertainty, this is going to be a much more difficult process for you. And but you don't have to rely on your own resources. We make that mistake often, that we think that we have to rely on our own sources. We're here having a community conversation today. We have to rely on our community. You have to reach out to your neighbor or to your friend or to your boss or to your HR department or your employee assistance program or your counselor or your preacher or your pastor or your dog. You've got to reach out. It's all about resourcing. So resourcing is the key to courage. Okay, at least from my perspective, working in the communities that I've worked in, is we have to, it's like, well, if she's going back to work and she's going back to work and she's going back to work, then maybe, then maybe I can do that too. And but it's okay to express that fear. It's okay to sit around the lunch table that first day back and say, wow, this is really scary. So again, right. It's about acknowledging those things and being able to call it by its name. This is hard, this is scary, and coming to terms with, I have to have the courage to do this because I have to get paid, because I have to feed my family, because I have to pay my bills. And so we have to do whatever it takes to be okay, but we don't have to be excellent in order to go back to doing those things. Being okay is enough. So we can't put too much pressure on ourselves that everything has to be just so, and then we'll have courage.
Right. And I think there's this element of, and I know that I've seen the debate on social media around the idea that this is the moment to write your book, or to learn how to build a space shuttle in your backyard, or whatever the excellent thing is. And this level of resistance and pushback that in itself, or that expectation in itself, is a form of, or can create trauma for people who simply need to be and to deal with their fears or their concerns. So that idea, and I love the way that you said it, that it's okay, being okay is okay, that in itself has value. I think it's so important for all of us to remember and to really kind of consider as we're all trying to do the work that we are invested in doing. And I think another question, and kind of thinking about that, is as we kind of look at engaging communities, and you have this experience in working with communities with various challenges, how, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but I think the easy way of saying it is, how do you engage with people who if you have kind of been disconnected from a little bit, but then how do you acknowledge people's fears, or how do you enter into space kind of after this, and really find that point of connection, and even in some ways collaboration to move things forward? And how do you even figure out if people are ready to move things forward?
Well, the reality is most people are not going to be ready. Someone that think they're going to be ready, man, I can't wait to get back out there. And then they're going to get back out there and be like, wow, everything's different. The way we do things is different. The way we act, the way we talk, everything is, some people are be like, I want to get back to normal. Well, the normal that was, we're going to have to grieve that, because it's, we may get back to some semblance of that, but it's going to take a long time. So like, I know for our staff, like we have these weekly staff meetings and everybody talks, we sort of like do a go around and everybody sort of talks about how they're doing. Okay. We never did that before. You know, it was, what are you doing?
Right.
So we need to be asking different questions. So to the leaders out there, if you supervise any people, or you in charge of people, or you have opportunities to have conversations with people in your communities, we need to start asking different questions. You know, the questions were about, you know, what do you do and how much do you make? Well, now it's like, how are you? Is there anything that you need? Right. And those questions just feel so different. Okay. But then you're going to also have people out there that are not used to people asking them what they need, and they don't want to answer that. Okay. Right. So then you're going to have to recognize the person that has the deer in the headlights, you know, when you ask them how they are, and they're like, I'm fine. We always joke and say when somebody says that they're fine, that means they're struggling. And fine is not a great word. I mean, think about it, Janelle. When your husband asks you if you're fine after an argument, or if you tell him you're fine after an argument, you don't mean it.
Okay.
Fine.
Yes. Yeah. And you're right. In that context, fine means I'm functional and disengaged. Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be a big thing is when we do go back to some things, and we do, you know, start getting back into some rhythm of things, is recognizing what we've lost, because what we've gained is these awful words like social distancing. Like when I hear it as a therapist, it's just awful for me. Or the terms non-essential. Like it tells people, it's telling you, you don't matter and stay away from me. You're too close. Don't get near me.
Right.
I've been working for 20 years to make that stuff not happen. And now here it is.
So what's a better, and that's true. So like, I've tried to like think about alternatives to the term social distancing. What do you kind of use? Because we often have to communicate that we have changed our practice in order to keep people safe, and we're following this guideline of like what? Like how do we? And I think that's so important thing about language. What is a healthier alternative?
Well, you know, a lot of people build fences, and they build them as a boundary so they have privacy, but it doesn't mean they don't love their neighbors. Okay. So good fences make good neighbors. So, you know, as a therapist, I talk a lot about boundaries, and, you know, it's important that like we have boundaries with our spouse or our kids or our families. We don't love them any less. It's just, it keeps us healthy. And the same thing applies to space. You know, we can have those spatial boundaries. And I really, you know, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll make it my mission to come up with some different language to correct those words. But I think if people can start looking at it in terms of that, is setting spatial boundaries versus social distancing, because we're not talking about changing our sociality, if that's a word. We're talking about creating healthy space. But now we've taken on this term, and now people think, oh, social distancing means if you're too close to me, I can just give you a dirty look and not say hi to you anymore.
Yeah, we've seen that. And Janet Blaylock, I hope I said your name correct.
Hi, Janet.
She's here. She said, how about safe spacing? I like that.
Yeah, I like that. Safe spacing is good. Yeah, it's much better than, I hate the word social. I don't think it's the right message. And I think that it's making people feel like they don't matter. And we have enough of a shaming crisis in this country. We do not need to be sending that message.
Thank you for that. And I also thank you for talking about how leaders need to rethink the questions that we ask, like in the beginning of like conversations or in gatherings, or when we're trying to like move people forward. And I think it also changes the benchmark kind of for what we see as our intention or our goal, I think it's important, you know, to get the work done. But it really, what you said really highlights that it's also important to make sure that everyone is there and together and healthy in a way that can get that to happen.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I think, thank you, because I think that's really, really important. So what are, like, if you could like corner people in a room, which have the ability to.
Do I get to pick which people?
Yes, you get to pick all the people. What do you think that people, like, at the end of this, like, if you could have a conversation with people and keep them in the room and just say, these are like the things that I need you to consider or to know kind of in this moment and coming out of it, what would you want to say to people? Like,
I think one, again, is do not underestimate the importance of having a way to monitor your emotional health. So we've heard like joking terms like home arrest related to all this. Okay, well, there is a grounding practice called self-arrest, where when you recognize that you're starting to have thoughts that are taking you down sort of the rabbit hole, for you to be able to, in the moment, be like, okay, wait a minute, there, I've done it. You know, I've got that stinking thinking. I need to stop.
Thinking.
I need to arrest my thoughts, and I need to go water those new plants.
Right. We just planted.
Or I'm going to write some music or get back on my piano, or I'm going to play the guitar. I need to go do something because this has created a void in most of our lives, and we have to fill that void with something. And if we can do that, okay, if we can engage in that as a coping skill, we can also stop some of those negative thoughts from coming. So the self-arrest is a big thing. And I also think that's a great mindful grounding tool anyway. I think even for folks, when they go back to work, you're going to have moments where you're going to be asked to do some things that you don't feel like you're ready to do. Okay. You know, there are a lot of people out there that are resistant to change, and change is happening quicker than it's ever happened right now. So you have companies that used to have to, you know, well, we have to develop a policy and procedure, and then we have to take it through, you know, take it up the chain of command. Now it's just a decision is made. Oh, this is how we're doing it.
Right.
And I love that for the most part. But people who don't like change, you know, their heads are going to explode. Like, wait a minute, you know.
Right.
So I think you have to recognize, like, oh, so like if you're sitting in a meeting and you're back to work and you're being asked to do all these things, and you're thinking, well, you know, I needed to ease in a lot slower to this. You have to recognize your thoughts and the thoughts that are scary and that are overwhelming. You have to acknowledge that they're there. And then you have to make sure you have some opportunity to either communicate with somebody at work or somebody, you know, we talked about resourcing earlier, journaling, writing some things down, having an opportunity to just sort of get some of your thoughts out, I think is huge. I think tapping into whatever resources like your workplace or your work environment may have for you when you return. You know, sometimes you'll be offered supports at work and you'll think, I don't really need them. Well, you do.
Right.
So if your boss is, you know what, I really would like everybody to, you know, to flex their schedule, or, you know, don't be the hero. If your boss is giving you an opportunity to still maybe work from home a little bit and a little bit at the office, you know, everybody has to evaluate what is best for them. You know, this is going to be, you know, we're all in this together. We've heard that a lot, and there's some truth to that, but it's also, for a lot of people, that's not true. For a lot of people, it is very isolating, but there's a lot of people that don't get energy being around other people. So, you know, people will get through something like this different than the person next to them. And we have to have an awareness of that. And we have to have that gift of grace. We're going to have to practice forgiveness. So if you're sitting in a board meeting, or you're sitting with other people and it seems like they're sort of lagging behind, we're just going to have to be more patient than we were before. And we're going to have to forgive people a little bit more. And we're going to have to love people even when they don't deserve it.
I love that. So we have a question.
Yeah.
Alex, let's see, related to transitioning out of being at home, what tools can you recommend to navigating the awkwardness of social settings, especially when it seems like everyone has their own interpretation of what is safe and comfortable and what is not?
That's such a great question. And I think it sort of piggybacks on what we were just talking about, because people experience things so differently. They're sort of going to be all over the map. One of the things that we do just as human beings is we expect people to read our minds.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to do a better job of being able to articulate, hey, you know what, I'm really not comfortable with that. We have to be able to set the stage for that. It depends on the culture of the work environment. There are certain work environments where if you say that you're not comfortable with something, that's not going to be received very well.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's very, very individualized. I think the main thing, if you're looking at any transition, whether you're transitioning back to work or you're, transitioning out of a marriage, or any just our residents at the shelter, they come in and they're in this transition phase where they're transitioning from not having housing to having housing, and then having all this programming, and there's a lot of resistance and a lot of uncertainty to all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It really goes back to understanding what your purpose is. What is my purpose? Because if you have an idea of what your purpose is, you can deal with a lot of other things as long as you maintain focus on your purpose. We often get stuck in the weeds about things that don't have anything to do with our purpose, So sometimes, when you're living in community living, you will have, and I think this is a great example, you will have residents who will get frustrated with other residents.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes all their focus. Okay. And the same thing can happen in a workplace. You get so focused with this other employee who keeps that you're just irritated with. And I always tell our residents that the other resident has nothing to do with how you got here and has nothing to do with where you're going. And that sort of allows them to sort of reframe their focus.
Mm-hmm.
And if everybody's focus is sort of individualized, I think sometimes you think what your focus is. So like I've worked a lot with people who struggle with people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that their focus is to be good at their job or to be good at certain things. And I'll help them understand, well, actually your focus right now is to be liked. Mm-hmm. And we need to work on that. Mm-hmm. Because that's impeding your ability to do the other things that you need to do.
Right.
So insight is hugely helpful. You can deal with almost anything that happens in a transition when you're going back into something or having to do something that's difficult. I'm a big sports fanatic, so I'm always interested in how athletes, go back onto the field after they've been injured. Mm-hmm. Last season, we thinking about Greg Olson and all of his foot injuries with the Panthers, and he would have this anticipation and he would go back on the field ready to go and healthy. And then a couple of plays later, he broke his foot again. And mm-hmm. It's just like, oh my gosh, but you know what? He went out there with the hope and belief that he was going to play and that it was going to be good. And we have to do that. We have to have that belief. We have to have that resiliency. And then we have to believe in our ability to cope with things if it doesn't go our way. Okay. And if we can't do that, if we don't have those resources, we need to find ways to bring that into our lives, mm-hmm. So I am a very behavioral type person with my clients. Okay, you're upset about this. Let's acknowledge this. Okay, but then what do we need to do to get you to a better place? Mm-hmm. We don't always have that insight, though. Sometimes I learn so much with my clients by the questions I ask them, and then I thought, I should really ask myself that. That might be helpful. So I think the key to returning is having insight, knowing what you need, knowing how to communicate that, you know, knowing who you trust, know what's going to anchor you. And if you don't know and you don't have insight, resourcing, you know, getting involved with a therapist or getting involved with somebody that you trust that brings out the best in you, somebody that can help you to think things through. Or, you know, writing, you know, I write lists. I'm a big list person, and I'll write down things I've already done just so I can check them off. Type A. Type A. But what that does is it allows me to see that I'm accomplished. And the more I'm accomplished, the more I know that I can accomplish. And it's sort of one of those tools that helps to hold me accountable. And, you know, nobody has to go back and be a hero. And if you go back to work and you're feeling shamed or you're feeling judged or you're feeling a lot of just unease, either you're not in the right place, okay, or you're not taking care of yourself. So, you know, you're going to need to attend to one or two of those to be okay. But remember, like I said at the beginning, it's okay to be okay when you go back. You do not have to go back at your best. None of us are going to go back at our complete best. This has been hard for all of us.
Thank you. That's like wonderful. And if you're not, so you brought this up a little bit earlier about like mean mugging people at the grocery store if they get too close to you. So how do you, which is a reality, right? So like we've been taught, told, conditioned not to stand too close. What is like one good little bit of advice you could give for how to communicate your need in a space that is not a workplace? So at Harris Teeter at the meat counter, somebody's lingering a little too close to you.
Okay, so you could have that song, Don't Stand Too Close to Me, just have that available. Like just start like playing that.
Press, you're ready to go.
Like have like it on a keychain, you just press it, you know, or just bring a megaphone in with you, you know, and make the sound, you know, what is that the forklift at Sam's Club or whatever, it makes
the little beeping.
Yeah. So we, you know, we could all just sort of install that like on our keychain, and then, you know, we just start to back up.
I could do that.
You could try that. But if that doesn't work, a couple other things. One is modeling is very important. If you are paying attention to how you are being in space with other people, the hope and belief is that other people around you will notice. Okay? It's sort of like if one car stops for the funeral procession, all the other cars stop, right? So it's sort of like that. So you know, you sort of set the stage, but if somebody is behind you and they're you feel like, you know, okay, we're going to use the sports analogy, encroachment, like they're getting too close, right? Okay, so you know, you can turn around and you can give them a smile, and you know, you could certainly ask, you know, not everybody's gonna love what you have to say, but it's not necessarily about getting people to be kind, because if we had the ability to shape everybody around us, we would be a much better society. But I do think it makes us feel better if we feel like we are being assertive about our space. Like, would you mind just backing up a little bit, please? You know, just using that language. But I think you have to understand that it's not always going to be met with the most positive feedback.
Right.
For sure. But modeling is the big thing, you know, set the stage for that, for how you want people around you to interact. And if you're that uncomfortable, step out of the line. Just step out of the line until you feel like it's safe again.
Right. So I will not, if you see me at Harris Teeter with like the little megaphone thing, just let me, no judgment.
No judgment.
So we are running out of time. This was a great conversation.
Wonderful.
I really want to highlight some wonderful things that you said.
Okay.
So, I like the phrase "stinkin' thinkin'." I never heard that before, but I love it. And I think we all like relate to it. Like we know when we're in that moment. And
Yes.
think how to get out of it.
Yes.
The idea of self-arrest, I think like that is incredibly important because it's a space that you can control. And it's a way for you to like reframe your thinking. And I really, really kind of love that. And then also when you talked about race and this idea of leadership, and that's just, I think, super important and amazing to really help people kind of think about that. And like what it means to be a leader and how we can really kind of take care of each other in these moments, and that our role, right, in community as creatives, as people who are invested in other people, that idea of really seeing where people are and extending and leading and with grace is so critical kind of at this moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome.
And I thank you for elevating those things, because it's often, right, that kind of hustle back, get back, this normal,
yeah,
that's kind of unrealistic.
Yes. Yeah. And I think too, I think there's a reason that we have church services, and there's a reason why people go to concerts, and there's a reason why people congregate at coffee shops. It's because we all want to be together, and our being together has been significantly challenged in this time. But I wholeheartedly, believe that we will get back to some of that. Okay, but we have to be vigilant in terms of, seeing this time as, yes, it's been traumatic, and yes, it's been overwhelming, but we do have to have an attitude of gratitude. There have been some good things that have come out of being at home. You and I both have boys that are seniors in high school, and we've seen their faces more this year than we ever thought we'd get to.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think I know for me at work, I've seen people that are really struggling still do really amazing things, for each other. And we've still, had people bringing food and bringing donations. And, I see when I, walk around my neighborhood and I see people planting flowers, and, I have a front porch, and I see people out walking together and having conversations with their families that I've never seen. I've lived in this community for 14 years. So I don't feel like the connection that we have for each other is lost. I think it's actually been heightened in some ways. But we still have work to do. But we are a resilient community. I know, and I think that the community of people in the helping profession, and people who want to serve communities, we are dogged. We're just getting started. I've been doing this 20 years, and I'm just getting started.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
So I'm so glad you were able to join us today. And if you are free next week, because we're doing our community conversations weekly, on Wednesday, you talked about gardening. Our resident Brandon, our fellow, will be doing a talk on herbalism. So like how to get fabulous herbs that we all now have planted everywhere.
I love it.
What to do with them other than like drop some in some like water. That's my favorite. I'm like, I'm having this water. Like that's the extent of my like herbalism, but it'll be a wonderful opportunity on Wednesday to kind of learn about what to do with those. And then on Thursday, we Monica Holmes, who works for the city of Charlotte, is going to come and talk about like creativity in Charlotte. So everyone's
I love it.
I hope you come.
I love what y'all are doing, and that you see the need for us to stay connected in this way. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you. You too. And I'll be the loud one in Harris Teeter the next time.
I'll be looking for you. I'll have my fence.
Perfect. All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. You too, hon.
Bye.
Bye.